Never so soon have I ever been proven wrong than what we said last week, and that it was probably the stupidest controversy that we had ever heard of regarding the Trump alleged comments about the military. And 1 week later, not even 1 week later, we now have the Bob Woodward tapes. We have Rage, the book that has come out with bombshell allegations about what Donald Trump said in regarding the coronavirus and regarding his handling of the coronavirus. And as per usual, you could have already guessed before you read anything more about the story what certain outlets would say, whether it be Fox News, the New York Times, CNN, whatever it was. You could predict what it was that they were going to say, and they said all of those things. But we're going to look at that a little more here on this episode of The WireTap. Hello everyone, my name is JD.
And this is Logan.
And this is The WireTap. Thank you for joining us. As we said there, Rage has come out, the Bob Woodward book about everything Donald Trump. And last time he came out with a book called Fear about Donald Trump, and it was widely panned and discredited because it used anonymous sources. Where have we heard that before? Well, this time, apparently Donald Trump gave 18, 19, 20 different interviews with Bob Woodward about various different things, and a lot of those things make up what this book is about. And The Guardian, their headline, "Will Bob Woodward's tapes bring down Donald Trump?" And this is what they all hope. Now, Bob Woodward holds high regard in the eyes of the left because he is the famous Watergate reporter. He's the famous one who helped, he wrote a book and all that kind of crap about Watergate, broke story, all that jazz. So he holds, the pantheon.
He is the bigwig.
He is the bigwig of being the government watchdog for the left. Politico puts out a story, Trump rushes to contain fallout from his interviews with Woodward. President Donald Trump launched a new counterattack against the Washington Post. Bob Woodward, which he works for the Washington Post, so that tells you a lot as well, arguing the veteran reporter would have released the recordings of the president's remarks about the coronavirus sooner if they were truly politically damaging or revealed a threat to American safety. The offensive by the president comes as he continues to face intense criticism in the hours after the Post and other media outlets on Wednesday published excerpts of Trump's 18 on-the-record interviews with Woodward conducted for the journalist's forthcoming book. And basically, what Trump, the two little bites that they're taking out of this is that Trump said that he wanted to play down the coronavirus. And the way that this is being played up in the media is that, this follows a pattern of him calling the coronavirus a hoax and all of these other things, which he hasn't done. And there's a piece here from CNN, why this Woodward book is devastating to Trump. Rage may be Bob Woodward's most important book since All the President's Men, in which he and Carl Bernstein laid out the history of Watergate. It's because of the tapes. President Trump gave 18 on-the-record interviews for Rage. Woodward recorded almost all of them, and what we have heard so far, the president does an excellent job of hanging himself with his own rope. Unlike his previous book, which Trump denied because of anonymous sources, Trump himself, in his own voice, is this book's main source. Here's the thing about this entire thing regarding what Trump said of the coronavirus is that what did you want? What did you expect? Because if Trump comes out there and he is all doom and gloom or panic or whatever it might be, Well, that's going to trickle down to the media, and then the media would have turned around and said, well, under the leadership of Trump, which they already are anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but they would have said, well, Trump's leadership here has caused a panic. It's caused the stock market to absolutely crash, because if Trump does that, that's what would have happened. The stocks would have absolutely skyrocketed into the ground. And what do you expect from a leader of the biggest world superpower whenever they are trying to handle a pandemic in terms of their own response domestically, in terms of financially, and affecting the world in those respects as well, in the world economy and the world governance? There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of things that has to go into that decision. And whenever you exude fear or panic or worry, other than strict resolve, whenever you exude anything other than strict resolve, determination, and confidence in what you're doing, people are going to likewise panic. And it could have made things so much worse here in the United States if that would have been his response.
I mean, the media is just... They are so lazy in this respect, because we have the headline this week from CNN that talks about how this is devastating to Trump. And last week we were talking about Trump with the comments on fallen soldiers. Mm-hmm. And what was the headline? This is detrimental to Donald Trump. Every single week it's just a new headline of how this is detrimental to Donald Trump's re-election.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said there, we never have been so quick to be so wrong about something, because just as soon as we make last episode, and just as soon as the news cycle gets focused on the previous story about Trump's alleged comments about the military, we now come to this with Bob Woodward and his book, and what Trump said about the coronavirus, and what Bob Woodward and his tapes and everything, and what Trump said with that. The obvious takeaway from this, to anybody with a shred of integrity, is that he's not talking about dismissing it and not having a response, because it's obviously not true. It'd be one thing if Trump says this and then there was no action on the part of the White House and the administration to do anything to contain said virus or to mitigate the risks of coronavirus. That would be one thing, but it's very obvious that that is not the case, because all the way back in January, before anything, despite what Joe Biden will say, before anything had come from the left or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi in terms of responding to the coronavirus and mitigating its risks and trying to reduce the risk of transmission, all the way back in January, Trump issued travel restrictions and bans from China, where this virus began, if you don't remember, but where this virus began, to prevent people from coming from China to the United States. And Nancy Pelosi famously goes and says how horribly racist this is, and how America needs to go to Chinatown, to support the Asian Americans and the Chinese American community.
Well, they do. Okay, presidents do this all the time, and the government does this all the time. Whenever you're going to war, or even like back when we were having the conflict with North Korea, a lot of times you talk that down diplomatically, and you have a sense of calm over the nation. But secretly, back in Area 51, you can be stockpiling and preparing the military to go to full-scale war.
Yeah, and it's kind of, and it's interesting that you bring up North Korea, because it's kind of what the whole relationship with North Korea has been. And there's some things in Woodward's book talking about North Korea and letters between Trump and Kim Jong-un, but like the whole our whole policy and our whole relationship with North Korea has been a gigantic bluff. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what that kind of is what you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent people from panicking. That's the whole goal of that. and the media
feed off of
will
panic.
feed off of it. For one, they'll feed off the panic because that's just what they do. But now what the media is going to do is they're going to feed off of this and brew this and make this into something much worse than it actually is. See, the president was lying to us the entire time. He said that he wanted to downplay it, which means he was lying. No, it's like whenever you have a child, all right? And I don't know, somebody's in the hospital. They have to go to the hospital for a serious surgery or a procedure, or maybe like one of their grandparents is in the hospital and they're not looking well. Okay, it looks like that they might pass away. All right, it's the same difference of telling that child, everything's going to be okay. They're just going in for their, but internally, this could become something very serious. This could be something very bad. It could develop into something very tragic. And that is the same thing here that Donald Trump is dealing with. But the media is going to spin it, and they're going to play it as though he was maliciously deceiving the American public in his response to the coronavirus, whenever that's not true at all. This is what world leaders do, because there are things that the public, quite frankly, doesn't need to know about certain things. Especially whenever it comes to military, military operations, military things. And that's something that in the past, many years and decades, they've gotten very cavalier about, that the media feels as though that they are entitled to knowing everything about military operations and the minutia of the details. Whenever that puts a lot of people at risk, and it risks people's lives. It risks the operations. It risks...
There's a reason it's
everything.
classified.
It's a reason that the stuff is classified. It's a reason that it's secret. And the media has gained a sense of entitlement, which goes along with much of American culture now anyway, is the sense of entitlement. That you see entitlement from the government to get what we call entitlements in terms of money and assistance and all that kind of stuff. The government providing you services like healthcare and everything coming from the government. There's that sense of entitlement to that. There's entitlement to your objects of want. Your internet, your television, everything that is considered now essentials, and you're entitled to that. Well, the media feels as though that they are entitled to information that they don't necessarily have to know. They don't necessarily need, because there is a reason to keep it classified. Yeah. It's not just trying to keep the media in the dark because you're trying to hide something. There's a reason that this is classified and you don't need to know it. And likewise with President Trump, there's a reason I'm saying, trying to downplay this a little bit and look at the optimistic, because Donald Trump is an optimist. And I believe I said this like a long time ago too, that Donald Trump is an optimist, because this was something that came up in news conferences many weeks and months ago, was about his response. And it was, I don't know what it was specifically in the press conference, but it was like, it makes sense, because Donald Trump is an optimist, and he doesn't like having to go up there, and he even said that at one point. Yeah. Do you think that I like coming up here and reporting all this and blah blah blah, telling you?
We were talking about that with the hydroxychloroquine and every single different thing that's come out.
Yes, that's what it was. It was the treatments, the hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, all that kind of stuff. And yes, that was whenever I said, Donald Trump is an optimist, and he's trying to look at all available options for something
to work,
to help this pass, not even just for the United States, but for the world. Because inevitably, what the United States comes up with in terms of therapeutics or pharmaceuticals to combat the coronavirus is going to go worldwide and become the treatment. Not from Russia. We're not going to take Russian medicine.
Of course, theirs is already out.
And that
they beat us in the speed game.
They say that they have a vaccine and all that kind of stuff. Now, whenever you get the vaccine, your insides come out of your body 3 to 4 hours later, and then you die. But
it's better than the cough.
It is a vaccine, and it's better than the cough and the itchy, watery eyes that might come from coronavirus. But inevitably, what the United States comes up with is going to go worldwide. And Trump is an optimist. And I think that plays in here, and that he not only does he have a responsibility as a world leader to try to maintain a sense of calm and a sense of peace, but by nature, he is
likes
always
things positive.
He likes things to be positive and to be built up, not torn down, so to speak.
We saw that with the conventions.
I mean, he likes things on the upswing and not so negative all the time. And that's just the way that Donald Trump is. And there was an interesting thing here. Getting off of specifically the coronavirus, the CNN article talks a little more about the Woodward book in general. And it says, in Rage, Woodward records a number of untethered from reality Trumpian claims, such as that he has done more for the black community than any other president than Abraham Lincoln. We'll continue here. Woodward noted to Trump that it was Lyndon Johnson who pushed through the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that had, and it literally even says that in this article. It says, prohibited employment discrimination on the grounds of race and had mandated additional school desegregation. Trump, who doesn't readily absorb any facts that don't fit his own heroic self-narrative, pushed back saying, I have done a tremendous amount for the black community, and honestly, I'm not feeling the love. Now, this is an opinion piece from CNN, but it does sound like some of their normal reporting anyway.
Yes.
But they go back, and this is what the left does often, is they go back to Lyndon Johnson, because he passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act and all this other kind of crap.
56 years ago.
56 years ago. But guess what? Lyndon Johnson would not have... Well, let me back up for a minute. Lyndon Johnson was in the presidency whenever that was passed. Republicans had been pushing for legislation such as this for years and were stonewalled by the same Democrat Party that Lyndon Johnson was a part of. Because guess where Democrats were? They were in the South. They were of Jim Crow and the KKK and all of these other things. The Democrat Party supported segregation. They supported all of these different things that we look back on today, and the media, shakes their head and wags their finger at. Shame on you for those things, because that's apparently Republicans' fault, or white America's fault, or America's fault in general, because it's fundamentally flawed. The Republicans pushed for this for years, and it wasn't even it wasn't until 1964 that Democrats finally got on board and passed it.
Mm-hmm.
Because Lyndon Johnson thought that it would be beneficial for his re-election campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even that Lyndon Johnson got on board of it. Got on board for it.
He led the charge to
it's
get
not like
this passed.
Yeah, it's not like he led the charge, and it's not like he did it out of the kindness and the goodness of his heart, because he was an activist and a fighter, and he realized how many rights that black Americans at that time were denied. Because there's even an infamous quote, and just because I don't want to get demonetized at all from YouTube, I'm not even going to utter said quote or any euphemism part of it. I'm not even going to go there. But there's a very famous quote of Lyndon Johnson regarding African Americans and voting for the Democrat Party for the next 200 years or something to that effect. And there's a very famous quote there. And Lyndon Johnson was overall not a very good person. And
you thought that Joe Biden's comments that he made a few weeks ago about you ain't black if you don't vote for me was bad.
Lyndon Johnson just in general was just kind of a crappy person in general. and he gets a pass on everything. Because nothing about Lyndon Johnson is ever talked about because of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Nothing is ever talked about with LBJ. And you can't criticize anything that he did because of this. You can't talk about the Great Society and the behemoths that we now have of Medicare and Medicaid and all the freaking rest of our welfare programs that are currently bankrupting our children and our grandchildren and racking us into debt.
So, Civil Rights Act, JD.
But the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was long overdue, but was something that Republicans supported on record for many, many years. Legislation just like it, those same things outlined in the 1964 Civil Rights Act were supported by Republicans for years and decades. It was official party platform, and it was not until LBJ and the Democrat Party decided to
get on the wagon train,
woo the black community into voting for them that he finally got on board, and the party finally got on board with the Civil Rights Act. And this is just goes into part the general ignorance of the population. Can you equate the party of which the KKK comes from and them suddenly out of the goodness of their hearts passing the 1964 Civil Rights legislation?
There were still
can those things? There were still
in the Democratic
active Klansmen in the Democrat Party in Washington, in Congress at this time,
and there were until the 90s.
Can these two things coexist? Just out of intellectual honesty and curiosity, can you ask yourself that question in your mind? Can those things coexist quite as well? The general ignorance of people about this is surprising, but quite frankly, I didn't expect much more to come out of CNN anyway. But that is all we have time for on this episode of The WireTap. Make sure you go to our Twitter and our Parler. We are at the CWire, capital TC and W. We're at the CWire. The links to the articles that we discussed are going to be in the description down below, so go check those out. And make sure you go to our SoundCloud if you're listening to us, watching us here on YouTube. And if you're on SoundCloud, go over to YouTube and watch us over there. For Logan, I'm JD saying goodbye, God bless, and we will see you in the next episode. We've managed to top what we did last week, only a week later.